Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor here, back again with another review, and this time we're going to be reviewing the fourth installment in the Devil May Cry series, Devil May Cry 4. Let's get into it. I think I broke my leg.
The story goes that Sparta served as the feudal lord of the city long ago. The people who live there today take these legends as truth and worship him. Just like a god.
Your Holiness!
You got a jacked up notion of fair play, pal. And it's beginning to piss me off.
We must evacuate the residents back to headquarters. Report back as soon as you can. And be careful. I got it already. Though a fight every now and then does make life a little more interesting. Don't you think? Go! Get out of here! That arrogant kid possesses demonic power!
Why did you do this?
This isn't what you think.
Back to headquarters! She has nothing to do with this. Let her go! This is all Kratos doing. Let her go!
Devil May Cry was published and released by Capcom back in 2008, following on the success of Devil May Cry 3 after the failure that was Devil May Cry 2. Devil May Cry 3 is greatly considered the best game in the series, and one of the greatest hack-and-slash games ever made. Devil May Cry 4 had a lot to live up to, and with the changing of characters, new story settings, and even smoother gameplay, does this game exceed 3 in any possible way? Let's find out. Now, previously, I've reviewed and played the first 3 games here on the channel, and I have to say, Devil May Cry 1 was a very solid and good experience when it came out. Devil May Cry 3 was an amazing game in my opinion that brought so much innovation to the series, including Dante's character, and Devil May Cry 2 happened. So, with all that in mind, Devil May Cry 4 is the follow-up to Devil May Cry 1, or 1 and 2 technically, canonically, since 3 was the first game. Devil May Cry 4 features a new character, though, known as Nero, someone who works for a secret organization known as the Order of the Sword, who praise and worship Sparta as a god. Now, this organization has a few hidden secrets here and there, but Nero essentially is part demon. He has a giant demon arm that he can have very special abilities with. Dante, of all people, at the beginning of the game comes in, assassinates the leader of the organization, and takes down several several guardsmen. Nero engages Dante in a fight before Dante leaves, hinting that there may be more to Nero than meets the eye. Throughout the game, Nero discovers more about what the organization is truly planning, involving very sinister plans, discovering more about himself throughout the entire game, something that doesn't get fully revealed until Devil May Cry 5, granted, and fully encountering Dante and learning more that Dante may not be his true enemy in all of this, all the while trying to rescue Kyrie, a girl that he loves throughout the entire game and gets kidnapped as a damsel in distress. So, yeah, that's essentially like a quick little synopsis of the plot. Devil May Cry isn't really known for its in-depth stories, with the exception of possibly 3. The stories are more so filler-in for the villains and whatnot, and they do add some good substance in the lore, don't get me wrong. I think Devil May Cry 3 pulled off the story really well for the type of game that it was. Devil May Cry 4 is one of those games that, with the story, I really enjoyed. I liked Nero as a character, I really liked his introduction into the series. I'm very much looking forward to, after I saw this game, I'm very much looking forward to see what he does in Devil May Cry 5. And all in all, though, I really love seeing Dante as well in here. Now, he isn't in here as much, and I really would have loved it if Dante had a bit more appearances, because his wisecracking humor just adds so much to the game. Dante is the backbone personality of the Devil May Cry series, by far. The other characters in this game I thought were alright. Kratos was there. He was okay, I guess, as Kyrie's brother. Kyrie was, again, just there. Nothing really amazing in terms of characterization. Lady and Trish were in this game. Lady was in there for like one flashback cutscene. She didn't add much to the story at all, except for like a brief cameo. Lady was in there maybe 2 or 3 times to talk to Dante, when it's revealed that she was undercover in the organization to expose their evil plans, but again, that's about it. I would have loved to have seen them more in here. And Sanctus, the leader of the organization, who's the big bad guy, he's okay, like I said. He's not an interesting character, but there's no real backstory development for him. I would say overall the characters, with the exception of Dante and Nero in this game, and the overall plot, it works. It's okay for the entire game. I did enjoy many different moments of it, including the bumbling, stuttering scientist, Agnes. But I will say Dante and Nero are by far the best parts of the story for me personally, especially Dante. I love Dante as a video game protagonist, and I really wish he would have been in the game more. The story works for what it is. The villains aren't as much of... The villains just aren't as amazing or memorable this time around. The boss encounters, for example, too, something I loved about Devil May Cry 3. That game had an amazing story bit, where Dante interacted with each of the different boss fights, and he talked and exchanged witty dialogue with them. And I think that that worked to its game's advantage. This game, there's not really much of that present here. So all in all, though, considering the characters and the story, it works well, but it's not as good as DMC3, I don't think. Now, if we're talking some things that I think this game did a little bit better than Devil May Cry 3, the music in this game I actually enjoyed a lot more. The song that Kyrie plays throughout the first part of the game, and throughout different points of the game when you go to the different divinity statues in order to upgrade your weapons, or you go to purchase different healing items and orbs to refill your devil trigger meter and whatnot. I love the music in this game. It works really well for that whole opera church theme that they were going for, and I really did enjoy the song that plays. I think that it's really good. And honestly, from Devil May Cry 3, I enjoyed the atmospheric music that played during the battles and cutscenes and whatnot, but it just wasn't any memorable tracks that made me think and go like, wow, that's such a beautiful piece. Devil May Cry 4 did that for me in that department, so it edges out DMC3 a little bit more for me in that department. Graphically as well, Devil May Cry 4 does it really well too. I really did enjoy the visuals in this game. I didn't really see too many visual hiccups while I was playing. The environments look really crisp. They look really good on this gen consoles, considering this came out on the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Environments look good. The animations for Nero and Dante both look really fluid. The lightning effects that each of them have with their sword attacks, the different effects that the different guard attacks have from the different enemy variants you face with their lights flashing and the weapons, they look really good. The castle environment that you go through in Fortuna looks really nice and very foreboding and eerie, as was expected. The forest is very lush and vibrant for the areas that you do go through, and I really did enjoy that aesthetic of it. And even like the end of the game where Fortuna Castle is destroyed, and you have to go through the main HQ where the fountain's destroyed, for example. It's a little detail like that with the water coming up. I really did enjoy that as well. And there are many different set pieces in this game that I thought looked cool. The Savior, for example, I thought was designed really well, especially in the image of Sparta. We're going to get to this in the next section, but even though this boss fight isn't that amazing, I really did enjoy the visual fidelity for that specific boss. So all in all, I would say Devil May Cry 4, it does the music really well. Visual-wise, it works really well too. Again, I don't really have any complaints in these departments. So this gameplay section is probably the most divisive thing about Devil May Cry 4 in comparison to other games. Now, I want to see this right off the bat. The combat in this game and the controls is what I'm going to cover first here. I think Devil May Cry 4 works amazingly with it. I don't think it's better than Devil May Cry 3, but my gosh, the controls work so well. They're so fluid, it's fun to execute. The different combos and moves and whatnot that you can execute, Dante and Nero respectively. Dante with his classic moveset of being able to switch to his different drive forms, if you want to call them that, his different styles that he has. With Dante's gameplay moveset being able to move around fast, being able to transform to his Devil Trigger, being able to perform different wild combos with his sword, Rebellion, with able being used Ebony and Ivory, his shotgun, and various other little boss weapons that he picks up throughout the game, which I don't think are better than DMC3, but they still work really well. Dante's fluid, and he's basically overpowered in this game, but he feels very nice to use. And Nero, for as a new character as he is, he just works really well too. I really like Nero's playstyle in this game. Not just because he's fast and fluid with his sword and his little one-shot gun that, you know, I don't think is as good as Ebony and Ivory, but I think it works well. They both work really well. The one thing I loved about Nero, though, a bit more in this game was his little devil arm, the Devil Bringer. There's a combo move that you can upgrade in the shop where you can grab enemies from a distance and perform a slam attack, and depending on the enemy variant, you can slam them multiple times into the ground, and perform wild combos if your Devil Trigger meter is completely filled up in a boss fight. I really love these animations, and I loved how fluid Nero was controlled. Just zip around the screen, slash enemies, shoot them from a distance, be able to use your Devil Bringer, and string together combos. I thought it was very impressive with Nero. And like a highlighter with Dante, as the other playable character, Dante has always been very fun to control. Even in Devil May Cry 2, as much as I really don't like that game, Devil May Cry 2's Dante was still very fluid to control as well. So there's no complaints in the combat or the controls here. Devil May Cry 4 executes it very fluidly and very satisfying-like. And the other thing that I really want to bring up in this part, too, before we get into some of the other stuff, the system that you have here works really well the same as far as the upgrade system goes. You have your red blood currency that you can use to buy different healing stars. You can buy your Devil Trigger meter refills. You can go and buy gold orbs to revive yourself in battle. You can even spend the time buying blue orbs in order to level up your max HP or as time goes on. And obviously your max Devil Trigger as well, depending on when you level that up. But of course, there's also different weapons that you have available to you. Now, Nero doesn't get any excess weapons other than his main sword and his guns and whatnot, but Dante does, though, from various boss fights. Granted, though, this is the latter half in the game. You don't get much use of it in the base story if this is your first time playing. You'll get some fun out of them for sure, but I will say this, I wish the weapons would have been included a bit earlier in the game, so you had a bit more time to get used to them and have a bit more diversity with them. Some of the weapons include, you know, Beowulf gauntlets from the last game. They're not Beowulf gauntlets, but they work the same. Giant overpowered fist. There's a giant briefcase known as Pandora that can form into allegedly 666 different types of guns, but you get only like maybe 5 or 6 variants, but they still work really well, like a Gatling gun, a rocket launcher, and a few other ones. And there's the final weapon that basically shot locks a bunch of different arrows in place and fires them randomly at different places, and you can upgrade this thing to supercharge everything. And that's another thing about the shop, too. Aside from the weapon fidelity available to Nero and Dante, they can also upgrade their weapons in their different stances. I will say, with the extra new currency that you have in this game, aside from the red souls, I forget the name of it, but there's an extra currency that you can use to upgrade your weapons and whatnot. I really didn't find much use for it overall. The different styles and whatnot you can upgrade, and the different moves like double jumping and being able to collect red orbs from a distance, I didn't really find much use for personally from a gameplay perspective, especially for Devil May Cry. But, you know, if they're available to you, if you really want to go through the trouble of grinding them out, but just know that you don't need even half of these things in order to get through the game fine. I would go for a lot of the different weapon upgrades. Don't get me wrong, like Stinger in this game is completely overpowered. It works fantastically when you execute it well with Dante. But overall, though, I like the upgrade system. The controls are very fluid to do, and the gameplay as a whole, as far as the combat's concerned, is fantastic again. Now, there's a reason why Devil May Cry 4 is considered a good game in the series, but not the best game within the Devil May Cry series. That honor goes to 3 for the most part from what I've seen. Devil May Cry 4 features a lot of different gameplay mechanics and whatnot that I'm personally not a fan of either, and apparently I'm not alone on a few of these different gameplay changes. For one, you play as Nero for about half the game before he's captured by Sanctus and used to power the giant savior statue that Sanctus wants to use in order to destroy the world along with Kyrie, who is also trapped inside the statue. You play as Dante for the other half of the game for, I would say, approximately 6-7 missions. The problem with playing as Dante in this game is you go back through the exact same areas that you went through with Nero, the castle, the forest, the town that you started out in the beginning of the game, and that's where it ends. And Dante, it's just boring in this point. The fidelity, there's nothing new to do, there's no new clever puzzles, there's nothing really fun to do in these levels except re-battle the same bosses that you did. The difference is Dante gets some new weapons that you can't use very well because it's that later in the game, and the boss fights, there's no new dialogue exchanges that are really witty or clever, there's nothing new about them aside from Dante's moveset, the levels are exactly the same, and there's no new interesting puzzles in order to navigate, aside from a poison gas-filled lab that you have to go back through, which that's not fun to traverse either. So Dante's part of the game there is very lackluster. It feels like an afterthought when Dante got added into the gameplay, and the big problem with it isn't playing as Dante himself. Dante is fantastic to play as, like I mentioned before, with the controls and the gameplay for the combat. But the fact that Dante goes back through the same areas, with the same bosses, that you have to repeat again later in the game, might I add, Dante's areas and section of the game is just boring, and Dante doesn't even have enough screen time, in my opinion, overall in the game. I feel like he should have had a bit more. It just feels like Capcom added Dante in to kind of appease fans because they figured if they just play as this new character Nero, people aren't going to like the game as much. But I would rather have Dante playable in the game, but in a new sense. Have Dante go through some new areas. Have Dante do some new things. Have different boss encounters. Have different enemy variants, aside from the 2 or 3 that you actually get. It's just Dante's portion of the game is really boring to traverse. In addition to that, Devil May Cry also hasn't been known for their major puzzles and whatnot, but I will say there are some puzzles in this game that drag out the experience a little too much. Devil May Cry has basically been, you find an item, you pick it up, you use it to unlock a new area. That's basically been the puzzle style this game series had going for it since the beginning. But in this game, though, you have 3 specific dice puzzles that you have to do throughout the entirety of the game. About 2 at the very least with Nero. Dante's, thankfully, you don't have to do in typical Dante fashion. He just slices the die in half. Nero, though, especially for when, mission 19, when you have to get to Sanctus for the end, it is so tedious and repetitive to hit the die, you have to go around the board, and you have to go up to these different areas and re-battle the boss, 3 of the different bosses that you fight throughout the entire game. 4, if you're counting another specific one. But I would say all in all, though, the puzzles in this game just don't add much fidelity. The dice game, for example, is just repetitive. There's different, if you hit a yellow spot that isn't going to take you back instantly, you get teleported to another part of the map. Red spawns enemies. Blue is kind of like a safe point. You get some health and some money and whatnot back, but all in all, though, they're just not fun to go through. And some of the visuals themselves, after a while, kind of get boring and stale. Nero, for example, you have to actually go in through these different areas again into the same boss fights, mind you, and it just adds to the repetitivity of it. Well, at the same time, with Dante, you just went back and replayed these boss fights. So I would say, though, it feels dragged out. Some of the puzzles aren't as good. They just don't have some areas that overstay their welcome. Dante's portion of the game feels like a last-minute chuck-in, and it really doesn't work to the game's advantage in these areas, which are some of the biggest criticisms. And it wouldn't be such a big deal, but Dante's portion especially, it's just repetitive and boring. And combined with the lackluster cast, aside from Nero and Dante, and the story not having as big a drive or an impact as like the last game, isn't really that amazing to me. All in all, though, Devil May Cry 4 was a good experience. I very much enjoyed this game. There was a lot of things I loved. I loved the visual fidelity. I loved the music. I loved the appearance of Dante and the evolution of Nero and the setup for the future Devil May Cry game in the form of Devil May Cry 5. I really enjoyed the combat, the weapon selection that you did have, even though it wasn't as great as Devil May Cry 3. The combat was very fluid to execute, and overall, it just looked and felt amazing to play as Dante again, as well as Nero for the new abilities that he brings to the table, like his Devil Bringer. However, there are parts of the game that are bogged down. Dante's portions of the game are really boring. It gets very repetitive pretty quick when you go through the different repetitive puzzles that they chucked in for the sake of just being in there, like the dice puzzle, and even the stupid spinning blade minigame that you have to go through out the Fortuna Castle. The lackluster boss fights in one cases don't really help the experience either, and combine that with the various different other issues that I mentioned in this video that really bog the gameplay experience down, like that final boss fight. My gosh, that sucked butt. But I would say, all in all, though, Devil May Cry 4 is a fantastic game, all in all. I highly recommend you guys go and play it. I don't think it's the best game of the Devil May Cry series. I think for Dante's character and for the gameplay experience, combined with the story, Devil May Cry 3 is the better experience. But Devil May Cry 4, nonetheless, is still a good game in other departments, aside from being lacking in some other areas. It's a good game worth your time. I recommend you play it, and check it out for yourself. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know what you guys think about Devil May Cry 4 in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts and feelings, as always, about the review. And if you guys have played the game before, or you have some thoughts from this video, or from anyone else that you know, let me know, again, your Devil May Cry thoughts in the comment section. And if you did enjoy the video, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel if you guys want to catch more videos like this one in the future. I'm planning on, in the future, the next 2 videos coming out after this, possibly, will be the last 2 Kingdom Hearts games of our marathon for June. But either way, guys, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. And keep on gaming.